In the last mini lecture, we said that correct specimen handling is what makes an accurate diagnosis possible. Now, let's make that concrete by following a single specimen on its journey, from the moment it leaves the patient in the operating room all the way to the signed pathology report. My goal is that by the end of this lecture, you can name every major step in that journey and, more importantly, see exactly where your work as a histotechnician fits into it. Keep one thing in mind as we go. The steps that histotechnology owns come early in this chain, and everything downstream depends on them being done right. This lecture connects directly to your Lester reading on the general approach to the specimen and the surgical pathology report. So, let's follow the specimen, shall we? Here is the whole journey on a single slide, and we'll walk through it in groups. A specimen starts in the operating room, is accessioned into the lab, undergoes gross examination, then processing, embedding, sectioning, staining, and finally, microscopic examination that produces the report. I've shaded it into 3 zones: the pre-lab steps, the gross room and histology lab in the middle, which is histotechnology's territory, right? And the diagnosis at the end. I want you to notice 2 things. First, how early in this chain the specimen gets handled by the histotechnologist. And second, how many later steps depend on those early ones being done correctly. This pipeline is worth memorizing. We'll return to it all term as we go deeper into each step. For now, let's follow the specimen through, beginning in the operating room. The journey begins in the OR, or the procedure room, where tissue is removed from the patient. Along with the tissue, the clinician fills out a requisition form. Think of it as the specimen's identity documents and travel orders. It records who the patient is, what the specimen is, and where on the body it came from. This is also where correct labeling begins. The patient's identity and the anatomic site are captured right here at the source. And this is critical. If that information is wrong at this step, it stays wrong through every step that follows, because everyone downstream trusts it. We'll spend all of next week, week 2, on exactly this: reading the requisition, matching it to the specimen, and catching errors before they cause harm. For now, just register that the journey starts with tissue plus paperwork, and both have to be right. Now, how the specimen travels matters more than you might expect. Some specimens arrive fresh, with the clock running, because certain tests require living, unfixed tissue. Others arrive already in formalin, which is the standard fixative, and this preserves the tissue and effectively stops the clock so it's stable for routine work. Here's the consequence, and it's a big one. Choosing the wrong path can quietly ruin a case. A specimen that needed to be sent fresh but instead arrived sitting in formalin cannot be unfixed. The opportunity for those special studies is simply gone. This is why recognizing fresh versus fixed and knowing which a given case needs is a real skill. We'll go deep on fixation and the fresh versus fixed decision next week. For today, though, just hold on to the idea that this choice exists and it has permanent consequences. When the specimen reaches the lab, it's accessioned, which means logged in and assigned a unique accession number that will follow it for the rest of its life in the laboratory. Every block, every slide, every report will carry that number forward. Accessioning is also the lab's first real quality checkpoint. At this step, 3 things get checked against one another: the requisition, the label on the container, and the specimen itself. If those 3 don't agree, if the requisition says one thing and the label says another, or the specimen doesn't match what the paperwork claims, the process stops until it's resolved. You'll hear me call this the three-way match next week, and it's one of the most important safety habits in the entire lab. For now, place accessioning in your mental pipeline. It's the gateway where the specimen officially enters the lab and gets its permanent identity. Now, we reach the gross examination, the grossing bench, and this is the heart of this entire course. At this step, the specimen is described, measured, and sampled. Sampling means someone decides which pieces of the specimen go forward to become slides. Depending on the specimen and the laboratory, that person may be a pathologist assistant, or a trained histotechnician working within their scope. And defining that scope as a thread will follow all term. Here's the critical point. The sections chosen at this step determine what the pathologist can and cannot see under the microscope later. If the right piece isn't sampled, the diagnosis can be missed entirely. Not because anyone read the slide wrong, but because the diagnostic tissue never made it onto a slide. That's why grossing carries such weight, and it's why we spend so much of this course on doing it well. The sampled tissue now moves through the core histotechnology steps, the ones you'll master across this whole program. First, processing. The water in the tissue is removed and replaced with paraffin wax, so the tissue becomes firm enough to cut. Then, of course, it's embedded into a wax block and sectioned, sliced astonishingly thin, just a few microns on a microtome. Those thin sections are mounted on glass slides and stained, because unstained tissue is nearly invisible under the microscope. The routine stain, the one we'll hear talked about constantly and that we are complete professionals at, is the H&E, right? Hematoxylin and eosin, which colors the nuclei and cytoplasm in contrasting tones so the structures become visible. There's special stains in immunohistochemistry that come later. I'm moving quickly through these because you'll spend entire courses on them, and most of you are already working in the profession. So today I just want you to see where they sit in the specimen's journey, between grossing and the pathologist's microscope. Now, the pathologist examines the finished slides under the microscope, but they don't look at the slides in isolation. They combine what they see with the gross description, the clinical history, and any special studies. And from all of that, they render the diagnosis and sign out the case. I want you to notice something about this step. The pathologist is relying on the gross description that you would have written in the sections that you would have chosen. They weren't in the room when the specimen was fresh. Your documentation is quite literally their eyes on that moment. If your description is vague or your sampling was poor, the pathologist is working blind. The end point of the whole journey is the surgical pathology report. It goes back to the treating clinician, becomes a permanent part of the record, drives treatment, and can even become a legal document. Your Lester reading covers what that report contains and why. So let's pull the journey together. 3 things to carry forward. First, a specimen passes through many hands on its way to a diagnosis, and the early steps shape everything that follows. Second, those early steps, accessioning, grossing, and processing, are core histotechnology territory, which means they're yours. And third, because of that, your accuracy upstream directly becomes the pathologist's accuracy downstream. There's a straight line from a careful gross description to a correct diagnosis. In the next mini lecture, 1.3, we'll meet the people along this journey and sort out exactly who does what. The pathologist's assistant, the histotechnician, and the cytotechnologist, including where your scope of practice begins and ends. That question of scope is one of the most important professional judgments you'll build in this course, and 1.3 is where we start. I'll see you there.